Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Don Gulling, CEO of Vertex Consulting. Thank you for joining us today. We've got a great content-packed agenda, some excellent guest speakers, and I'm really excited about presenting this information to you today. A couple of program notes for you. The first one is we've got 3 guest speakers today: Savannah Hall from Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Harrison Travis from HPE as well, and also Mark Grumblatt. So that said, we're going to go ahead and begin. I want to frame this conversation essentially by focusing on the fact that we have seen an alarming increase in the rate and severity and impact from ransomware attacks. And in our position at Vertex Consulting, unfortunately, sometimes we're called by folks who've already been hit. They found us on the internet from a Google search for ransomware recovery or whatever. And when they contact us, they've been down sometimes a day, sometimes 3 days. Ransoms are varying. We've seen them just in our own calls we've received up to $500,000. We've had some tough calls with some of these folks, and some of them have decided to rebuild from scratch rather than pay the ransom. Some have decided to rebuild the network from in the cloud. When they call us, though, typically they don't have a good backup, and the reason is because these advanced persistent threat actors are not just the old-fashioned smash and grab ransomware attacks. These folks are getting in your network ahead of time, snooping around, finding out your backup modality, methodology, looking to see if you've got Veeam or what you're doing, if it's attached to network storage. And very smartly, they are waiting until a weekend or a night. They're getting in those backups, pausing them, deleting them, encrypting them, and then encrypting everything else. And then when, customer comes in on Monday morning or whenever, everything is encrypted, including the backups. They're all gone. So they have no choice but to either pay ransom or essentially rebuild from scratch. And again, a lot of tough calls made. I've had to be on those calls and tell the client, hey, you need to get your insurance company on the line and find out, because you can't unencrypt this and you've got no backup. So the reason we're talking today is HPE Hyper-Converged is a solution that, Vertex we use internally. A lot of our clients use it. They're delighted with it. And the huge advantage is you get on just day-to-day usage, speed, reliability, performance, security. That's all there. But today our primary focus is on cybersecurity recovery and focusing on this idea that with SimpliVity, with this next-gen technology, and with our capabilities, you can rapidly recover, guaranteed recovery times, super quick, so that in the event of a disaster, we're able to quickly get you back online. And HPE backs this up with written guarantees, the first one that I knew ever did that. So we're going to talk some about that as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Savannah. Savannah is going to go over Hyper-Converged generally, and then once she's completed, we're going to do a demo with Harrison and then conclude with Mark. Lastly, we are going to monitor the questions and the chat panels, so feel free to put information in there, and we'll try to include that absolutely as much as we can. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Savannah.
Thank you so much, and good morning to everyone, and thank you all for taking some time out of your day to join us and learn a little bit about our Hyper-Converged solution. I'll go ahead and just kick this off. As he mentioned, I'm going to have a brief little overview of our solution, and then Harrison will actually go over a little bit of the security features and advantages against ransomware, and then the demo. So HPE SimpliVity was kind of created for that easy button to take the software defined and make it simpler for the VM admin within the environment. But we've taken that SimpliVity and we've actually enhanced it recently and made it more intelligent. So the new HPE SimpliVity is intelligent by adding that InfoSight layer. So InfoSight was an acquisition through the Nimble Storage acquisition that HPE made, and it's allowed us to take the true, simple hyper-converged and add some efficiencies to it in the background. So our HPE SimpliVity is something that we recommend for general purpose workloads, edge, and robo. It's going to be simple, it's still going to have that efficiency, and it's going to be edge optimized. And now we're going to help customers create that hybrid environment and cloud connected. So in a traditional environment, it's going to be that all-in-one. It's going to allow us to collapse the stack, removing those 10 different silos and making it into built-in one device One of the main advantages of HPE SimpliVity is going to be that backup and disaster recovery. In addition, we're going to have that zero downtime and giving you that flexibility to add on nodes and do upgrades. We've done the global unified management. It's going to be centrally managed out of vCenter. It is going to be a VMware type environment that we're going to take advantage of. And we're going to have that auto tuning, allowing for optimal efficiency and resilience within your environment. Some of the newest features that we're really excited about is the one-click upgrade. So it's going to allow for simple lifecycle management across your whole environment, giving you that one-click upgrade for firmware, hypervisor, and the SimpliVity OS. And then the last component, again, is that global intelligence, adding the predictive analytics within our environment and some of that self-care, wellness within the environment, the self-healing of your current IT environment. So again, this is kind of showing you how we're able to collapse the 10 different silos into one box, which is really efficient for an IT environment, giving you savings both in power and cooling, as well as the administration of it. One of the main differentiators between us and some of the other hyper-converged is going to really be that backup and disaster recovery built into the product. We've seen a lot of our customers actually remove or no longer carry backup software within their environment and just use what is native to the SimpliVity and taking advantage of those cost savings. Another main cost saver is actually minimizing your licensing costs with some of the other components. And then the global intelligence, I'm not going to go too deep into this because Mark will actually show you guys a little bit more about InfoSight. But this is going to be where you're going to have that predictive analytics. It's going to show you some examples, for instance, is your capacity. It's going to show you 90 days plus or minus where we think you're projected to be. Again, allowing the IT environment to really plan for the future, know if they need upgrades, know if we need to start budgeting for additional capacities and needs. You're going to have that global visibility within your whole environment and be able to see that multi-site VMware environment and be able to do your backups and see if there's any issues within the environment and where it's coming from. And then the automation. So it's going to look at different signatures, not only your signature, but other customers, and help mitigate risk. That is really the biggest advantage with the InfoSight portfolio and adding that into your environment is that it helps mitigate risk, and it's like adding an extra IT guide to your environment because it is intelligent and it's going to predict some of the issues that could happen before they even do happen. So this is our one-click cluster upgrades. As you can see here, we're able to simply just do, the hypervisor firmware as well as the SimpliVity upgrades with one click. You're also able to easily add nodes, and you're able to do that non-disruptively. And you're able to do this on the main core site as well as on the edge if you have extra nodes at different locations. And so our hyper efficiency is going to come from that data efficiency, with that dedupe and our very efficient backups. We're able to minimize how much capacity you're actually saving on your nodes and also minimize how many nodes you really need within your environment. The restore efficiency has actually been enhanced recently, and we're able to do 1 terabyte VMs within 60 seconds. Within the demo, Harrison will actually show you this so you can see it live, what it looks like and how quickly we're able to restore that. And then again, that system efficiency by really consolidating those silos and making that all in one box so that you can take advantage of that power and cooling savings and the administration savings by having it all done in one hyper-converged unit.
Let me, if I could just interject briefly on this one, Savannah, appreciate you showing this. My first reaction when I saw this a couple of years ago, I just did not believe it. I'm being honest. I saw this and I thought, this is a joke. There's no way you can get this kind of efficiency of data, 90%. It's impossible. We have a SimpliVity internally. We're at 94%. And if you count our snapshots, right, our backups that we're using in the SimpliVity, we have 94% capacity savings in our own unit. And I'm just blown away by that. So these numbers are real numbers. It's shocking, but true. So This is guaranteed. This is not something we're throwing out there as some kind of marketing slide. It's just an amazing, amazing technology. So I just want to vouch for the fact that this is real.
Yes, and to add on that, the restore efficiency is real, and you'll see that within the demo. That's where we're seeing customers really are blown away with, if there's an issue or, they lose a VM and they need to, maybe even it's the ransomware and they need to go back into one of those snapshots to restore that, it does really happen that quickly. So one of the other exciting new enhancements that we've added to the portfolio is the addition to additional backup, right? So, we have the backup built into the SimpliVity node, but many customers are used to saying maybe a disk to disk to tape. We now have the ability to do disk to disk to store once. And it gives us our customers the ability, if they have long-term retention or archive that they need to get that data off of a node and put it onto something more cost effective, we're now able to do that with the SimpliVity to store once with no additional licensing. It's native. It helps actually with SLAs and again, much more cost effective for that long-term retention. And these are all built in and can function together without, again, any additional software. And then the last piece here that I kind of wanted to chat on is the ability to really optimize the edge. So today you can have that core site, and if you have multiple locations, HPE SimpliVity has got a 2-node HA requirement, which is actually the least amount of nodes with many of our competitors. So you can have true HA at your other locations by just having two nodes. And they can all replicate back to the main core site. One of the advantages for that is the administration, that you can be all at the headquarters and you can have those nodes out there and still be able to manage it all and have it all come back to the main location. And then again, you can take advantage of the rapid disaster recovery with this. So we can have multi-site failovers, and a lot of our customers do this both planned and unplanned and take advantage of this feature and be able to augment their whole IT plan and solution. In Florida with hurricanes, this is pretty important and built into the SimpliVity nodes. So something many customers take advantage of. So that's my high level. I know it was quick, but I wanted to leave a lot of time for Harrison to be able to really go into the security pieces of it, as well as the demo, because in my opinion, the proof is in the pudding. So I will go ahead and pass it over to Harrison.
Yeah, while we do that change, we're going to make Harrison the presenter so we can show a live environment, because that's kind of the primary focus of what we want to talk about today, to see this stuff in production. Also want to remind you that I'm going to monitor chat in the Q&A section so we can try to interject as much as possible. When you start to see some of the technology as Harrison presents it, it's going to just naturally relate to you seeing stuff that you want to ask about. So please let us know. I'll keep a close eye on that. And with that, Harrison, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out today to listen to us talk about SimpliVity and ransomware. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yeah, it looks good.
All right, great. So again, my name's Harrison Travis. I'm the HPE HCI solution architect for the Southeastern United States. And really today we're going to talk about SimpliVity data protection, and mainly about ransomware and malware and how SimpliVity protects you natively against that. So I just want to talk about a couple of things about ransomware and COVID-19 actually, because the threat of ransomware has actually ramped up since COVID has come out. You would think that people would be, worried about getting the disease and everything like that, but hackers are actually attacking the hospitals and the labs that are working to come up with a cure for coronavirus. So they're actually increasing their malware attacks. The FBI has warned us that there's been a significant spike in COVID-19 scams targeting the U.S., and all of this is coming from the outside of the United States itself. So let's really kind of talk about SimpliVity and how SimpliVity data path works and how it protects you from ransomware. So when a VM writes data to SimpliVity, it is written to the NFS data store. So the data store is mounted to the local control of the OVC, where the write is processed into 8K objects and stored in the metadata table. These objects are analyzed and unique data objects are written down to disk. Multiple copies of the same 8K objects within the metadata table are additional pointers to the same unique data objects on disk. As long as a data object on disk has at least one pointer within the metadata table, it is stored as read-only on disk. Now that's very important as we move forward, that read-only piece. So remember that, please. And that's just writing it down to the object store. So let's talk about SimpliVity data protection and what actually happens when we do a local backup with the SimpliVity. So when a local backup occurs, a full copy of the VM's metadata table is created as a separate object or group of objects within the metadata tree. So there's our backup one. The SimpliVity backup of that VM is an independent entity and not dependent on existing VMs. There is no chain of custody. We only do full backups. There are no other type of backup with SimpliVity. We don't do incrementals. We don't do synthetic fulls. Everything we do is an independent full backup with no chain of custody to the originating VM. Because a second set of metadata tables is now pointing to that same 8K object on disk, it locks these objects as read-only, even if the VM's data set changes. So as we show here, the VM data set changing. When the VM writes more data or changes the existing data, it cannot delete objects on disk that are protected by the existing VM backup. If there are changes, those objects are added to the overall metadata table of the VM. When another backup occurs, we create a new backup object associated with the now current version of the VM objects, and the new backup is independent of both the VM and all previous backup objects. When a VM is infected with ransomware, the virus begins to encrypt the data on disk. As the data on disk is encrypted, those encrypted writes are translated to the metadata table of the VM as new writes to the disk, same as any other writes to the VM. As a result, the 8K objects in the metadata table are replace the previous objects with the new encrypted objects. Those are in turn written down to the SimpliVity object store as new writes. However, because the SimpliVity backup system has locked the previous objects as read-only, those are not overwritten by the ransomware attack and are protected. To recover the VM, you select the backup image and right-click. Now we're going to go over all of this in the demo, so you'll see it live here in a second. Once we right-click, we select Create New VM from the backup in the menu. And a new metadata object is created from the backup image, presented to vSphere, and a new VM1 is registered within vCenter and started. This recovered VM will be identical to the state that the VM1 was the time the backup occurred. Customer can recover a VM from SimpliVity backup in seconds and 3 clicks or less. We guarantee in writing you can recover a 1 terabyte VM in under 60 seconds. It's typically a lot less than that. And again, you'll see that here in the demo in a second. But because the SimpliVity backup is independent of the VM in a read-only copy, it is not infected and can be restored quickly. Now, once you've restored it, you can take the ransomware infected VM offline for forensic analysis. You can delete it or whatever your policies may be in place to handle an infected VM. But the key to all of this is that we store these objects in our data store in a locked read-only fashion that cannot be overwritten by the ransomware or the malware. All right, just give me 1 second and we're going to switch screens here. And while I switch screens and we go to our demo.
Yeah, and that's a great explanation of this technology, because I'm telling you that I've had umpteen customers explain to me, because they got hit on their prior environment and now they're very leery, right? Because they had Veeam, they had the other object store, they had another backup, and they're thinking that this is kind of similar to what they're accustomed to, but it is a completely new, fundamentally different architecture and is not the same kind of paradigm as what you've seen in the past with compute, NAS, SAN, software, it's radically different. So the proof's in the pudding, and we'll see it here. But that was a great demo. Thank you for showing that, Harrison.
Oh, no problem. Glad to do it. Can everybody see my screen again?
Looks great.
All right, great. Of course, this is vCenter that we're looking at right here, and this is the home screen. All the SimpliVity functionality is a plug-in to vCenter, and just to show you here on the home screen, here's our plug-in that gives us the SimpliVity functionality. One of the things that this gives us is the SimpliVity Federation tab that just shows us some really great, quick information about the environment today. Shows us our info site connectivity, whether the cluster is connected and whether we're registered. Shows us backup status and whether we have any failed backups. And I actually have 2 backups that failed. Now I can go in and look at the details on those and see what's going on and inspect that. Shows me compliance of VMs in HA state. Shows us cluster savings, space savings summary right here, and we'll go over that in a second. Shows us some management information and the controller status of the virtual controller status within the environment. So just a quick Federation screen is just some quick information about the environment for you today that we're working in. Within my environment today, and we'll kind of go over this, I have 2 clusters. I have a remote cluster and a local cluster. So if I needed to look at the remote cluster savings and things like that, space information, I can look here. And I can see my used space of 5.2 terabytes, free space of 4.72 terabytes, and a physical space here. Today we're seeing a deduplication ratio of 80.8 to 1, and a compression ratio of 1.5 to 1. So what does this all translate to? Is basically what I'm seeing within this environment is a 99.2% space savings. Again, we guarantee in writing 90% space savings across the board with SimpliVity. So moving on along, let's get into the functionality a little bit here. So I'm going to kind of come in, and we're going to look at the SimpliVity Federation. We're going to go to the backup policies itself. The backup system in SimpliVity itself is a policy-based backup system. Now, today in my environment, these are the backup policies that I have within the environment. These are not canned policies that just come with the solution. You define the backup policies in your environment that make sense for your environment. Right now, within my environment today, I've got a bunch of different policies. I have a bronze policy that does a daily backup. I have a silver policy that does a backup every 4 hours. I have a gold policy that backs up every hour, and I have a platinum policy that backs up every 10 minutes. Now, we can get a little bit more granular than that if we have to with CLI, and we can get down to about 5 minutes. I have a couple of other policies that I'm testing out here. One of the other policies is a store once policy. Again, Savannah talked about how we're able to natively send our backups outside the SimpliVity Federation to the store once appliance, giving you another level of air-gapped protection for your backup data. Let's drill down into one of these policies and kind of take a look at what a policy really is. So what is a policy? A policy is a set of rules, and a rule defines a backup. So if we look at the rules themselves, you tell it how often do I want to back it up, how long do I want to retain the backup, where do I want to send the backup, and I can send the backups to any cluster, SimpliVity cluster within my SimpliVity Federation. In this case, I have a local cluster and I have a remote cluster. Now, of course, with the new added store once integration, I can send these backups outside the SimpliVity Federation to that air gap backup appliance for that other layer of protection within the environment itself. So basically, we have the rules that it's easy to apply and easy to set up. From here, I can simply edit my backup policy, add a rule if I need to, select the new rule, edit that rule, and it's very simple for me to change that rule to however I need it. How long do I want to, or how often do I want to back it up? How many minutes, how many hours, or how many days? How long do I want to retain that backup? And I can retain it minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, or years. Where do I want to send that backup? And again, I can send it to any SimpliVity cluster within my federation. I can do days of the week or days of the month. and I can make it application consistent or not. We have two types of application consistency within the SimpliVity backups themselves. If I select yes default, and we'll see this in a little bit more detail here in a minute. If I select yes default, I'm invoking VMware snapshots to snapshot the VM, and then I back up off of the snapshot for a quiesced VM. If it's a Windows VM, I can get a little bit more granular with volume shadow services within the VM itself to quiesce the VM before I back it up. And I can set a start and stop time if need be. Very, very simple to create rules, add rules, or create policies or add policies within the federation itself. So let's move on a little bit and let's kind of go to hosts and clusters. So within my environment today, I have a couple of different clusters. I have my Orlando cluster, which is my local cluster, and it is comprised of 2 SimpliVity hosts running a set of VMs. My remote cluster is my Reno cluster. The Reno cluster itself is a single node cluster running a set of VMs within that cluster itself. Now for functionality, for SimpliVity functionality, it's as simple as a right-click function. At the cluster level, if I right-click, I can go to my all SimpliVity actions. I can create a data store. I can search the backups at the cluster level. I can set the time zone. I can register the external storage, which is that store once device that we talked about. I could suspend the backup policies or resume the backup policies or generate a backup report. Now, if we look at this at the VM level itself, again, just right-click the VM, get all SimpliVity actions. And at the VM level, I have a different set of SimpliVity actions. I can back up the virtual machine. I can clone the VM. I can move the VM. I can set the backup policy. I can search all the backups associated with the VM, or I can save credentials for VSS. Now, I want to talk about setting the backup policies within SimpliVity. We apply backup policies at 2 different levels within SimpliVity. When you create a data store within SimpliVity, within the VMware environment itself, you are forced to apply a backup policy at the data store level. Why? It's a safety net. Any VM, any template that you add to that data store is backed up by that policy at the data store level. Now, if I need to get a little bit more granular, I can right-click at the VM level, even though if that, let's say I have a data store that has my bronze daily policy assigned to the data store. Now I have a VM within that data store that I really need to back up every 4 hours, which is my silver policy. I can override that data store level policy by right-clicking the VM, just like I did, going to all SimpliVity actions and set backup policy. That overrides the data store level, and it applies the backup policy at the virtual machine level. So we apply those policies at 2 different levels. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about real quick is the virtual clone and the virtual move. The clone and the move that you're seeing on the screen right now are not VMware clones and not VMware moves. They take advantage of our global dedupe awareness, and we never rewrite blocks once they've been written down to the data store. It's part of our dedupe and our compression policies that we have in place within SimpliVity itself. So when I'm cloning the VM or I'm moving a VM, I'm not rewriting that VM. When you do a VMware clone, you're doing a block for block rewrite of the VM itself. With a SimpliVity clone, we're not rewriting those blocks that already exist. We're creating a metadata map, like we kind of saw with the ransomware example, with pointers to the blocks in the data store that already exist. So very efficient and very fast. As a matter of fact, we're going to clone this VM real quick so we have a clean VM to work with here. So I select clone, and it just brings up a dialog box and shows me information about the VM. Now I can leave this, and it'll take the original name of the VM and append a date and time, or I can give it something unique. So we're going to call it WHT clone. WHT are my initials, so that's why I'm using that. So I go to next, and here are my 2 cloning methods. Just like my backup methods, I can do crash consistent, which captures all the data at the same time, appropriate for non-database applications. Or I can do application consistent, which captures all the data in memory and all transactions in process appropriate for database applications. And again, here's my two versions of consistency. Again, I can do VMware snapshots to snapshot the VM before I back it up or clone it, or I could use volume shadow services to quiesce the VM before I back it up or clone it. In this case, I happen to know this VM is not a database VM, so I'm just going to use crash consistency. And one of the things that I do want to point out, this is about a 0.5 terabyte VM that we're working with here. So we're about to clone a 0.5 terabyte VM. So I click finish. Here's my clone coming down. So we just cloned a 0.5 terabyte VM in about 7 seconds, with another second to register that VM within the environment itself. So here's my clone VM, ready to go. What is this telling me right here? This is telling me that, hey, we always write 2 copies of the data within the cluster itself. So when we have that unique block come in, there's 2 copies written across 2 different nodes within the cluster for data protection. This is just telling me that it is actually making sure that that data is protected, and there's 2 copies within the environment today. So from here, I can just easily power on the VM. It literally takes longer to start the VM than it does to clone the VM with SimpliVity, and that's part of the efficiency of the global dedupe awareness that we're seeing within SimpliVity right now. There's my VM, 0.5 terabyte VM, cloned in about 6 seconds, 7 seconds, up and running very quickly. So now, if I'm a smart administrator, this is a brand new VM within my environment. So if I'm a smart administrator, one of the first things I'm going to do is come to my all SimpliVity actions and back up this virtual machine, so it's protected. So I select backup virtual machine. Now this is a manual backup. This is not the policy-based backup that we're working with today. So again, I can leave the original name and it'll append a date and time, or I can give it something unique. I select the cluster where I want to send it, or I can select the external storage to the store once again. In this case, we're just going to do a local backup to my Orlando cluster. I'm not going to set an expiration date. I click next. This is not a database VM, so I'm going to use crash consistency. So I'm backing up about a 0.5 terabyte VM here. I'm going to click finish. And here's my backup going. And I just completed a 0.5 terabyte VM backup in, what is that, about, I guess about 4 seconds. All right, so now if I'm a smart administrator, the next thing I'm going to do is go to my all SimpliVity actions. I'm going to go back up virtual machine again. And this time I'm going to do a remote backup. So it's geographically protected. So I'm sending this backup from my Orlando cluster to my Reno cluster. Again, I'm going to give it a unique name. Click next. Again, only need crash consistency, and I'm going to click finish. So here's my backup. Now this is of course a remote backup, so it takes a little bit longer time to do the remote backup itself. So here's my remote backup, and I backed that up in about 9 seconds or so to do my remote backup. So now when I right-click my virtual machine, I go to all SimpliVity actions, and I go to search backups. This is going to show me all the backups associated with this VM. So here's my 2 backups that I did. Basically, here's my remote, here's my local. Basically, it's telling me that it's making sure that the data is there's 2 copies within the environment, and that it's protected. So it's doing that on the back end, and it's saving the data in between the remote clusters. What is this telling me? Well, basically what it's doing is when we send a remote backup, basically we're not sending that full backup across the wire. We only send unique blocks across the wire. It's part of a global dedupe awareness. So our local cluster, which is Orlando, is aware of what our remote cluster is doing. So what happens is the local cluster, Orlando, sends a metadata map to the remote cluster in Reno. It says, Mr. Reno, I'm about to send you a backup, and here's the metadata map of the backup that I'm about to send you. Reno looks at the metadata maps and says, you know what? And the easiest way I can explain this is kind of like a deck of cards, 52 cards in a deck. So let's say there's 52 blocks in this backup of the VM. So Orlando sends Reno the metadata map that says, Mr. Reno, here's the metadata map of the backup I'm about to send you. Reno looks at it and says, you know what? I've got 50 of the 52 blocks that I need to make up this backup already. Only send me the 2 unique blocks across the WAN. I only need those 2 unique blocks. Again, it's part of our global dedupe awareness. So now, when I refresh this, we see both of these states are protected now. So that means that we've solved the local cluster, it knows it's protected now, so it goes to a protected state, and we've completed that backup across the wire. And oh, by the way, the only unique data I had to send across the wire was 22.5 megabytes of data. Again, not sending the full backup across the WAN. We've already got blocks in the remote cluster that are identical to the blocks from the local cluster, so we're not rewriting those blocks again. All right. So, God forbid something happens to my Orlando cluster and it goes down. I need to recover that VM in Reno. It's one of my primary VMs. It's one of my primary applications. So I right-click the cluster at the VM level, or at the cluster level, go to All SimpliVity Actions, and go to Search Backups. Now, what this is going to show me is all the backups that I have at the cluster level in my remote cluster or in Reno. In this case, I've got 2,026 backups within this cluster itself. Now, luckily, my backup that I'm looking for is right at the top of the stack. But if I needed to search for, if it wasn't, I have filters that I can apply within the search to quickly find the backup that I need within the environment. Now we're going to use my backup right there to restore this VM. So from this backup, I have these backup actions which I can do. I can restore the virtual machine. I can do a file level restore from that backup. I could rename the backup, copy the backup, calculate the unique backup size, and that's that 22.5 megabytes that we already talked about. I could delete the backup or set an expiration date if I didn't do this already. What we're going to do is we're going to restore the VM itself. So it just kind of brings up a little informational screen, and I can do two things here. I can create a new virtual machine from the backup, which is what we're about to do, or I can replace the existing virtual machine. Why would I replace the existing virtual machine as opposed to creating a new one? Ransomware. That's the perfect example. Again, being able to overwrite that infected VM with a safe, protected backup from earlier on when the VM didn't have the ransomware itself. So we're going to create a new VM out of this. Again, I could leave the original name and append a date and time, or I could give it a unique name so we can see it easier. From there, I select the data store I want to restore it to. Now I can send this restore to any data store within my SimpliVity environment. In this case, we want to restore to Reno cluster, so I'm selecting a Reno data store to restore the VM to. I click OK. Here's my restore happening, and it's completed. So I restored that 0.5 terabyte VM in about 4 seconds. Took another second to register the VM into the cluster itself. Here's my VM. All I have to do is come in, power this guy on. Here he is starting up. And again, takes longer to start up the VM than it does to restore a 0.5 terabyte VM. Again, the power of SimpliVity and the restores that we see here. So give this just a second to come fully up. Here's my restored VM ready to go. He's up and running. I don't need him on right now, so I'm going to power him off. Say yes to that. Let's say they recovered Orlando. Orlando was able to, they were able to figure out what was wrong. Somebody plugged the extension cord back in, so now I can repower my data center and we're ready to go. This VM has been running for a while within my remote cluster, and I want to preserve the data that's on that VM and move this VM back to my original cluster in Orlando. I have two ways I can do that. I could quickly do a backup, sending that backup from Reno to Orlando and recovering from that backup, or I could simply use my SimpliVity move. So I'm just going to use SimpliVity move. So I'm going to take the VM, I'm going to select the data store to send this to. In this case, I'm going to send it to an Orlando data store because that's where I want to move it to. Click OK, and it's off to the races. Now, basically what is happening is exactly what happened with the backup. They're exchanging metadata maps, seeing what unique blocks need to be moved across the wire, and that goes on in the background as this happens. One of
Hey,
the other
Harrison.
things, though, yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt your role there. This is really awesome. Everybody's, I think, kind of shocked and awed about it, but I do have a question. One of the questions was, what does a degraded status mean in the search backup screen for the local WHT backup? So when you were doing that stuff, it showed a degraded status, and the kind of the question was, what does that mean?
It's tied to that little yellow warning that we saw earlier. And basically what it's doing is it's verifying that the data, remember, I always said there's 2 copies of the data, 2 copies of the block in each cluster. And basically what it's doing is syncing those block copies across 2 nodes in the environment. And basically what that message is saying is that it was making sure that that data was protected across 2 nodes in the environment. So when you saw me refresh that screen, it all went to a protected state. So basically on the back end, it's just checking to make sure that the blocks are protected within the environment. Does that make sense?
It's a validation process. Yeah, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And it takes a little bit of time to clear it through vCenter, so you'll see the triangles themselves. Now, as we can see, the VM itself was restored over to the thing. Was restored from Reno to Orlando. Now, one of the other things I wanted to talk about real quick is one of the other backups that we can do real fast. It's from here. I just wanted to point out that we can also do a file level restore. So if you needed to recover an individual file from the VM backup itself, we have a way to do that within the VM.
And I love this because I'm telling you, the ease of doing this versus other tools that shall remain nameless, this is so much better. You know, as we all know, we're talking about ransomware and cybersecurity and really these cataclysmic events, but a majority of data loss comes from either, you know, insider threat, accidental deletion, accidental overwrite. How many times have any of us in IT been called like, hey, the CFO accidentally overwrote his last spreadsheet, or, you know, this finance manager accidentally overwrote this, you know, document that they need that was a wire transfer, and you got to go get it back. This is just so simple. It's all on the same panel. I love it.
SimpliVity is designed to be easy to use. It's all within vCenter. There are no other consoles to learn. So we try to make it as easy as possible. So if I needed to do a file level restore or a folder level restore for that matter, I just drill down into the partitions that are exposed. I can select at the folder level. I can drill down into a folder itself. And of course, you know, the first file that's going to get deleted is the one that says important document never delete. I can select that. I can click next. I can send it to any VM within that cluster. Click next. And basically what this does, I'm not going to click finish and do this completely because for the sake of time today, but basically what this does is it takes those folders and those files, creates a virtual DVD out of those folders and files, mounts them to the target VM. From there, you can go in and just move those folders and those files into the file structure where you need them. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple stuff here. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of that. Close this backup window. And really, the last thing I'm going to show you today is real quick about creating a data store. And again, those warnings right there are what we just talked about. It just hasn't refreshed the view in vCenter to do those. So when I create a data store within SimpliVity, it's very simple. Typically, when you create a data store, there's a lot of back-end work on the SAN that you have to do. There may be some work that you have to do either on the network, on the data fabric on the back end, such as zoning. We take 99% of that and automate it for you. So all I have to really do is give it a name, set my backup policy at the data store level. Again, it's a safety net. Make sure it's easy to do. Give it a size, click OK. It goes out, not only does it touch the vCenter, but it goes out and touches each one of the ESXi servers, pulls that information in, formats it, and right now there's my data store ready to go. Guys, that's about all there is to it. There's a little bit more to it, and I can go a little bit deeper and would love to go deeper with you guys. We do what we call every Wednesday, we do a deep dive demo. We have a webinar that we do every Wednesday on Deep Dive Demo, and on Tuesdays we do something called Test Drive Tuesday. So if you guys are interested, or anybody's interested in actually sitting down hands-on with SimpliVity, we give you access to a SimpliVity cluster in a lab, and you run through a lab guide that shows you all the functionality of SimpliVity within the environments. Would love to have you guys do that. Please just kind of Vertex, and we can get this set up for you guys. That's really kind of all there is to it for me today. Thank you for taking the time to watch my demo. Again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm glad to answer anything that you guys want.
Let me ask a quick question while you're in here. Yeah, absolutely. And that was a fantastic demo, especially focused on what we talked about, which was data security. First, starting off with the kind of a graphical overview of how this is radically different and not the same as what people are accustomed to. So that technology itself protects because it's read-only at that block level, can't be encrypted, right? But in addition to that, showing how this is all just kind of bolted into vCenter, simple, easy to use. My question is, one of the things I've really gotten a lot of power out of is the info site. I know we're not demoing info site, but just briefly, can you talk about what you think the benefits of that are in terms of managing this and getting some artificial intelligence related to your compute environment with info site? And I do have a question as well from one of the guests, and that was that it says, I want to make sure I'm understanding this properly. Say a device is infected for weeks and is finally realized, you could restore that from a previous version beforehand, but would you lose current data or no?
Well,
let me address that briefly, and then, yeah, but the answer to the question, yeah, go ahead, Harrison, if you want to.
I was just going to say, you got to remember that when a VM is infected with ransomware, it encrypts all the data, so you're not going to be able to retrieve that data anyway. It's locked unless you pay the ransom. You're not going to be able to unlock that data. If there's new data that comes into the infected VM, like I said, it's going to be encrypted, so you can't get to it anyway. So yes, you are able to restore from a previous time. If it was able to write data down to that VM, yes, you would lose whatever data was on that VM up to the point in time that you discovered the infection and were able to recover. But you will have those protected backups that you can recover too. We have lots of examples of this going on in real life. Municipalities around the southeastern United States. Matter of fact, I just had a call yesterday from a customer that was infected with ransomware. They were able to recover their environment within the hour, not having to pay the ransom at all. So that's part of the power of SimpliVity in and of itself. But unfortunately, if your VM gets infected, unless you pay the ransom, there's not a whole lot you can do about the data on that VM. And there's no guarantee that the criminals that are infecting your VM are even going to give you the real keys to unlock that data in the first place. Hopefully that. So what I want
to say, and that was a good explanation with a lot of detail, but kind of at a little bit higher level, I'll say this: the backups are safe, so the backups are not encrypted. The difference would be this: any data that was changed between or prior to backup, that piece. So you're mentioning this kind of weeks before. What I would say is, there's no way you wouldn't notice the data being encrypted from weeks ago. It wouldn't be able to be written to anymore. So if you had an encryption attack, it wouldn't be undiscovered for weeks in that sense. So as long as the backup occurs, the backup is protected. If there's changes made to data, operational stuff going on between backups, and you get encrypted, then you could potentially lose. But we saw earlier, one of the things that Harrison did demo was a policy-based backup that he called Platinum, which is a 10-minute backup. So in that sense, if you had a Platinum policy defined and you were backing up at that frequency on those servers, your loss would be essentially 10 minutes. And so lastly, to summarize that, when we were talking to clients about implementing these things, we're always talking about recovery point objective and recovery time objective. The recovery time Harrison addressed by showing us live, we can recover a terabyte in like 6 seconds, right? So the time is no big deal in this SimpliVity environment. the recovery point objective with the platinum policy that he had showed is 10 minutes. So in that situation, you'd be in a far better position than you'd be with anybody else or anything else or any other system. So I think we're kind of demoing that the recovery point is a 10-minute point in this case, or you could dial it down, as he mentioned, with command line stuff, maybe even faster. And
Correct.
then the recovery time is finger snap quick. So yeah, it is protected, and you would be able to get those backups back.
Now, as far as the info site is concerned, actually, Mark is going to go into that a little bit here with us and actually show it to us a little bit.
Yeah, I've got that covered, Harrison. You don't have to worry, Don. I'll go through that next when Harrison is done. I've got the demo for InfoSite too, and we're good to 11:30 as far as I know. So
yeah. So I'll do that. We'll make. Thank you, Harrison. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and pass this over to Mark Grumblatt and make him the presenter, so Mark is able to show his screen as well.
Thank you for your time today, guys.
Thanks, Harrison. Much appreciated.
Okay, thanks, Harrison. That was awesome. I work with Harrison, and I'm the local storage architect for HPE. And let's see how I minimize this little box here. See if I can get this out of my way here. Yeah. So can you see my screen? Okay, Don. Is this coming up all right?
Looks great. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know how to minimize this little guy. Maybe I can hide that. Oh, there it goes. Thank you. Yeah, Harrison is great. He's our HCI, our hyper-converged expert, and I am a storage architect and mostly focused on the older style 3-tiered SANs with nimble storage and 3PAR and those type of solutions. But the hyper-converged has the very big advantage of backing all that up in one place, like Harrison just talked about. So I'm going to talk about InfoSite a little bit. InfoSite was started about 10 years ago. I came from Nimble Storage myself back in 2012. I started at Nimble Storage, and in 2017, I was acquired by HPE. And one of the things that HPE paid $1.2 billion to acquire Nimble for was this InfoSite tool. And at Nimble, we started with InfoSite to collect metrics from day one on every system we ever ship out, things to do with telemetry data about the status of the sensors within the system, how you're connecting, and then we expanded that into VMware, where we were able to install a vCenter plugin and now extract from VMware per VM type of detail. So we can see the entire stack from the virtual machine all the way down to the storage layer. So this InfoSite tool has been around a long time, and it all collects into a central database that is a web-based portal for our customers. So no matter where you are, and I don't like to say it, but if you're on vacation and you want to check in on your system, you can do it anywhere you can get an internet connection. So not that you should be checking on it while you're on vacation, but the point is you have access to this InfoSite database as a HPE customer 24/7. It does get updated every 5 to 10 minutes, which is near real time for all of the critical sensors. And once a day, it gets updated with all of the configuration details. So this does a couple of things. One is it brings all of that detail into our support center. So when you open up a support case, all of that information is already in front of our level 3 engineers, and it really simplifies the support experience here at HPE for all of our products. So after HPE acquired Nimble, we were able to add in all of the ProLiant servers, our StoreOnce backup appliance, our 3PAR storage arrays, and now SimpliVity. So as you come in here and you look at InfoSite, we have dashboards available for all of our products now on the server line through the storage, and now including SimpliVity. So this is a fairly new integration with SimpliVity that came out recently. And what I'm logged into is one of our demo labs. I'm not in the same lab that Harrison was just using. I'm actually it's based in Europe. And you'll see that this dashboard that I log into shows me all of my data centers in one view. And this lab is based in Europe, so you'll see that the data center names are going to be Geneva and Grenoble. And I'll honestly tell you, I don't know where Avens is or Marin, but I kind of know where Geneva and Grenoble are. But these are all European locations, and you can see I have, as I scroll down, all 4 data centers are color coded in terms of how much capacity is being used on each of these. And of course, it's a lab, so it's a fairly flat consumption. Also on the dashboard, when you first log in, is you'll see anybody that has any kind of alerts or things that need attention. And you'll see the one Avon's data center here is getting low on space. He's 91% full, right? So these are the sort of alerts, but you also see over here in this column, the savings that we're getting due to the deduplication and the compression. The fact that we never store the same block twice gives us a tremendous data efficiency. So as you come in, also, I can come in now into the actual into the SimpliVity structure, and I can see from one view the data center list. Okay, so here's my data centers, all 4 of them. Again, a little different view of the same thing, but I can start to drill into the individual clusters. So in this particular case, if I wanted to come in and look at this Geneva cluster, for example, I can click here, and I can see that the total utilization of storage is 68%, and I can see the top virtual machines that are accessing this. So I can see who's doing the most IOPS and who's using up the most space. Over here, this particular VM is my #1 consumption. In terms of read and write, we break down the IO for you, but this gives you an idea. And if you wanted to click on one of these individual virtual machines, I just click on it and I get a detailed view of that individual virtual machine and all the statistics related to it. So we're constantly monitoring everything from the data center level into the clusters. And then we have what's called the OmniStack hosts. So one of the features of SimpliVity is this hardware accelerator. So all of the stuff that Harrison talked about in terms of managing that metadata is offloaded from the server CPUs that are servicing your production IO and your production processes. So we basically have a powerful offload engine to handle all of the SimpliVity type functions, so that the servers that you purchase with the Intel CPUs or AMD CPUs in there are all dedicated just for your production. Okay, so here's a view of the OmniStack host that we're talking about, and you can see what software level they're on. Our 4.0 is our latest code, what version of vCenter you're running, the ESXi host, and so forth. And then you can get into the individual virtual machines here. I can actually list them all out and start to get an idea of who my maximum read and writes are coming from here. I can sort on any of these columns that are clickable. And then, of course, always important, and nobody ever likes to talk about it, but we've been talking about it all day today, is the backups, right? Everybody's like, oh yeah, I got backups. Well, where are they? And this is one-stop shopping where you can see all of your local backups, based on the clusters, the remote ones. So if anything happens, in Grenoble, where they have a power outage or something, then, you can flip over to Geneva and bring these back online. And then, as Harrison mentioned, we've recently integrated with Store Once. Store Once is a backup to disk appliance that HP has had for a long time. Basically, we integrate with any environment to back up. Instead of tape, you back up to disk, our Store Once appliance, and that enables you then to copy that data out to the cloud as an encrypted copy. And we also use deduplication and compression on the Store Once appliance, so we get very good data efficiency there as well. So we have the full end-to-end solution for you, whether it's just the local backups or remote for disaster recovery or for any other reason, and of course the external backups to get it completely off of the cluster. So one of the other things I wanted to show you was our resources page. If you come in here on InfoSite, of course, you'll see Nimble. I'm a Nimble guy, so I'm really partial to all the Nimble stuff over here. And that's another discussion some other time. 3PAR and our Store Once appliances. This is where you would come to get all the documentation, any software utilities, access our support portal. All of this is done from this one page, and you'll see over here we have SimpliVity. I have a support page, we have a getting started page, and all of our documentation related to SimpliVity. This is all in one place, and the whole idea of InfoSite is it gives the customer a web-based portal access, and it also gives us internally, as your local team here in Florida, Dave and I and Savannah and Harrison, we can come in and take a look for things. If you need, I had a customer ask me for the vSphere administration guide the other day. Well, I came in here and got it for him, but I could have just as easily just said, hey, go look at InfoSite, you'll find it. And you'll see all kinds of things in here around, software updates and recommended procedures. So basically, InfoSight is included. It's no additional charge. It's part of your support agreement, regardless of which storage or server product you're running or hyper-converged product. This is included with your support contract. So there is no additional licensing or charges for this. So that's
InfoSight. Yeah, InfoSight. I would just say, if I could add this, Mark, to me, it's just like magic. Honestly, one of the things we didn't talk about here that I use it for, that we use it for internally, is the AI in InfoSight can find problems inside Windows VMs or SQL databases or terminal servers that you might not even realize you had. And so we've seen InfoSight dramatically improve our time to identify and resolve latent issues that aren't yet production problems that were going to become problems because of its AI. And it's astounding to me what InfoSight's capable of. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there on InfoSight. I'd encourage you to let us talk to you about more about that. But one of the things we're not focusing on is really what InfoSight can do for you day to day. But it's amazing that you just go check this InfoSight dashboard as part of your maintenance cycle, or have someone look into it, and it will bubble up. Hey, you got a SQL
absolutely.
performance issue you didn't realize, or there's a terminal server load balancing problem, and it's just, again, it's astoundingly capable of helping you. It is like adding somebody to your team. It's just amazing.
Well, yeah, absolutely, and that's the power of this. And of course, with Nimble, it's a little more VMware centric. Depending on which view you have. But yeah, the other thing I need to point out with InfoSight, to Don's point, is the proactive letting you know with a wellness scorecard, or like you said, it could be a configuration issue. It might be something where we say, hey, you should be multipathing on these 2 ports, and one of them is not, showing up correctly. Check the cables on the switch, that sort of thing. But what that does is it automates 8 out of 10 support cases automatically get generated through InfoSight for simple things that that we don't have to call support to find out. For example, a failed disk drive or power supply or phone home not working or something of that nature would be automatically create a case and notify you as a customer. And then that means that only 2 times out of 10 are you going to pick up the phone and call our support and talk to someone. But when you do, because we've automated all the level 1 and level 2 cases, the person that answers the phone is a level 3 engineer. So there is no sort of triage or trying to help you figure out, what's your serial number, what's your contract number, none of that. And not only that, when you do call in, like I said, we have your configuration right in front of us. We don't tell you to go run a core dump and upload a file or do anything like that. It's really come a long way. So, but yeah, that's all I got, Don, for the InfoSight. So appreciate it. Any questions, let me know.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. We're going to continue to monitor chat and Q&A panels to allow you guys and girls, ladies, to submit any questions you have. I do want to thank Savannah, Harrison, and Mark for demoing this technology, showing us the kind of unique and special and different tech that HPE has with SimpliVity, and how that can protect us and improve our ability to recover from an encryption attack, but also give us all kinds of other benefits. We're using this ourselves at Vertex. We have for years. We have several clients using it. It really has made a major impact on the speed, reliability, security, and disaster recovery of businesses and government agencies we're working with. So the follow-up to this, I would say, just like Harrison had mentioned, definitely let us know. We can get you kind of your own login to go in there, look around, try things out yourself, or a one-on-one kind of more hands-on type guided demo if you want. And that's all available to you kind of for free. And kind of a last plug for InfoSight, for those of you that are using HPE technology already but aren't using InfoSight, if you've got kind of the newer generation of servers, if you got Gen 10 or even some Gen 9, InfoSight can be added to those for free as well. So definitely take advantage of that. And it adds, as Mark mentioned, it's not as cool as what Nimble can do, Nimble's storage platform, but the InfoSight tools are, out there for us, for HPE systems users to add to most of the recent crop of servers, and give you a lot of valuable information. Thanks again for joining. I hope everybody has a great day and look forward to the weekend ahead, and we'll see you all again very soon.